Good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to be one of the first ones to welcome you all here tonight to our chapter's annual reclaiming of Armistice Day. And it's wonderful to see you all here. With everybody that has a flower, could you please line up over on that side? As we've done for most of our Armistice Day observances here at City Hall and at other places over the years, we begin our event with a 21 flower salute. As we begin this solemn reflection on all of the people, all of the resources, everything that has been lost to war, we begin with the ringing of the bell. And I promise I will try not to, if anybody's hearing sensitive, I'll try not to blow your ears out. So.
Well, good evening. They say that music soothes the savage beast. And I would like to thank Richard Pinney and David H.B. Drake for their soothing music, advocating peace over the beast of war. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Milwaukee Veterans for Peace chapter number 102, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the 18th annual Reclaiming Armistice Day celebration, a day to celebrate peace and not war. You may or may not be familiar with our organization, Veterans for Peace, so I would like to read our statement of purpose that we read each and every meeting. Here is our statement of purpose. We, as military veterans, do hereby affirm our greater responsibility to serve the cause of world peace. To this end, we will work with others, both nationally and internationally, to increase public awareness of the causes and costs of war, to restrain our governments from intervening overtly and covertly in the internal affairs of other nations, to resist racism and repression in our home communities, to oppose the militarization of law enforcement, to end the arms race and to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, to seek justice for veterans and victims of war, and to abolish war as an instrument of national policy. That is our reason for being, and I appreciate everyone in this room because I know that you feel the same way about these issues. So it is my pleasure now, I'm going to introduce one of our own members from our chapter, Mr. Roger Quindel. He has a brief reading and reflection to share his own experiences in Vietnam, how it shaped his worldview, and his desire to use his life to wage peace. Roger Quindel.
Thank you. I served in Vietnam from 1967 to 68. And before I read the story, I just want to preface it with some information. When I got to Vietnam, there were 2 people in my unit of 80 people who I knew from high school. And we were in the base camp for about 2 weeks because it was raining and artillery units can't go out. And we're part of the communication. So when it stopped raining, we finally head up north and we're going along the western border along Cambodia. And we go for about, at the end of the road, Tay Ninh and beyond, the villages are all gone and all you see is 2 slabs of cement for a small village, 8 slabs, a big village. This goes on for about 40 miles. So all the villagers have been cleared out. Everywhere you look, all the grass is dead. The trees are all dead. And then there's high grass that's all been turned brown by things we sprayed on it. So we're up there for almost 4 months. And I believe we didn't get attacked or fought 2 of those months. 2 of those days. And we had deaths constantly. And there were 10 artillery units, which is a massive amount, 60 artillery pieces, 1.5 million pounds of explosives sitting around, stacked up everywhere, constantly being replenished. And we lost people all but 2 days that I remember while we were up there. And it was, it was just pretty unbelievable. And then we split up and we go back and we end up in a village of Hoc Mon, 1 artillery unit, and so it's like 80 people, and we're there with the Arvins. And then one night, we're there for a few days, and a rocket comes in, or 2 rockets come in, and they land, and one of them kills my best friend who's outside. I'm in the communications vehicle and I'm badly injured, and the other 8 people in another bunker were hit. The rocket landed in it and killed all 8 of them. So it was like 9 people died, I didn't. But I did spend 81 days in a hospital and lost 40 pounds. And after 81 days there, this is my story. I was severely wounded on March 17th in a rocket attack that killed 9 other soldiers. About 5 or 6 days later, I was shipped to Camp Zama, U.S. Army hospital, 40 miles from Tokyo, Japan. While in the hospital on April 4th, Martin Luther King was murdered, After 81 days in the hospital and losing 40 pounds, the Army told me I was going back to Vietnam. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, on June 6th, as I was lined up to board a plane back, they announced that presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy was murdered in California earlier that day. 2 days later, I was sent to a fire base in the village of Trang Bang. One of the really great things about being stationed in a fire base next to this village was that you could always buy those little pleasures that were never available when in a base camp far away from any village. Those things that you take for granted until you are totally and absolutely deprived of them. Like what, you ask? You can buy a soda, you can buy a beer, you can get film for your camera, you can buy extra food from the locals. One mid-morning, a few days into my stay at Trang Bang, I bought a cold Coke from a young Vietnamese girl. Just when I turned away, I heard this Arvin, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, lieutenant, screaming at her. She quickly fled the scene. I asked a little boy I'd befriended what happened. Did Didi Mao? She go. The officers had forced her to leave. I didn't really get it. We wanted her there. I wanted to be able to buy a cold soda. Now she was gone. Hours later, she was back. I finally bought my cold soda. As I was putting the change in my pocket, the same Arvin officer raced at her, screaming once again. This time was different. He smashed her full force in the face with his rifle. She screamed in agony. I got blood on my pants leg. I couldn't believe what had happened in front of me. I was going to kill that Arvin officer. Our sergeant jumped in front of me and put his around that inhuman beast. Don't shoot him, don't. We can't have a firefight with the Arvins, our allies. Sarge, move, Sarge. Please move. I'm going to kill him. I don't want to hurt you. Other soldiers gathered and held me back. Some tried to calm me down while others helped get this monster away. We are risking our lives to put scum like him in charge? This is insane. The incident cemented my view that we were fighting for nothing. Our politicians back home and our command staff in Vietnam all knew that our allies were far more than useless. They were a menace to their own people. How can you possibly justify permanently disfiguring a young girl for selling a can of soda? I really felt this savage personally because just 3 months earlier, I had 8 bones in my head broken by shrapnel from a 122 millimeter rocket. I knew what she was going to go through, but I had excellent medical care from doctors and nurses who knew what they were doing and had the equipment and medical supplies I needed. She would have little of that. So why would an Army of the Republic of Vietnam, this officer, our ally, so brutally attack a young girl for selling soda? It turns out that this officer was in charge of prostitution, drugs, drink, and food sales in Trang Bang. Any Vietnamese involved in any of these businesses with American soldiers had to pay kickbacks to this officer. He would then give his commanding officer their share. I don't know if our sergeant or our officers were part of this other than renting the bunkers we built to protect ourselves for prostitution, but I wouldn't have been surprised. It was a dirty war that cost US taxpayers $1 trillion in today's dollars. Some people and some soldiers would do anything to get their share. She was not part of the crew. She had to pay a price. She had to be an example. And we had to fight, be injured, and even die to keep this abomination of human behavior in place. Our sergeant promised us something would be done about this incident. We are still waiting. Thank you. And if you want copies, there's some floating around at back or with me.
Thank you, Roger. It's now my privilege to introduce a friend of Veterans for Peace and a returning speaker. So you know he's good because he's coming back, right? Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Reggie Jackson. He is a Navy veteran. Any Navy veterans in the house? All right, you got some comrades back there. Navy veteran, an award-winning journalist, nationally and internationally recognized race relations expert, an excellent speaker, you're about to find out, and a writer, as well as a griot, which is a traditional West African oral historian. Reggie illuminates often overlooked narratives within the experience of people of color. He's a man of passion. He's a man of passion for peace and justice, and it's my privilege to welcome him and introduce Mr. Reggie Jackson.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank Veterans for Peace for inviting me to come back again. I believe I was supposed to be here 2 years ago. Unfortunately, 2 days before Armistice Day, I had a stroke. So it's been 2 years and 2 days since I had a stroke. I'm still here, thankfully. My health is really gone wonderfully well. I've had some great doctors, therapists. My wife has been just like amazing, helping me through those first 6 or 7 months after the stroke. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. Literally, she helped to save my life. And the passion that I have for the work that I do is also one of the reasons I'm still here with you all. Anyone who knows me knows that I talk a lot about history. I grew up at a time where a lot of our history, particularly my community, was never talked about in schools at all. And so I cannot remember a single history class that I took in school. People don't believe me when I tell them that, but I don't remember any. I know I took history classes, but I don't remember any of them. So what did I learn that stuck with me? Nothing that I learned in school, but I learned a lot from my family. So I was born in a little town in Mississippi called Charleston, Mississippi, 37 miles away from where Emmett Till was kidnapped and murdered at, just 10 years before I was born. And it was a segregated town, and my family was very poor. We grew up in a little bitty house. Myself, my brother, my mother, 2 of my aunts, 1 of my uncles, my grandmother, we all lived in the same house, and many cousins. We all lived in the same house. And right next door to us was my mother's grandparents, my great-grandparents on my mother's side. And so I knew from my childhood that my great-grandfather had served in the military, in the Army, when he was younger. He actually served in what was then called the War to End All Wars. We now call it World War I. And I remember seeing pictures of him in his uniform when I was a little boy. And I remember seeing other pictures of other men in uniforms. And these were my mother's uncles. My mother had 5 uncles. All 5 of them served in the US military, either in World War II or the Korean War. And so I grew up in a family where military service was pretty normal. And I didn't really think about it. I was just a little boy. But I remember one of my favorite TV shows was Gomer Pyle. How many of you guys remember Gomer Pyle? It was hilarious, right? I love that show. I used to, watch it every day of the week. And I had a fascination with the U.S. Marine Corps. My best friend and I, when I was in 3rd grade, used to walk through school singing the Marines hymn. I still don't know why I did it. We just loved that song for some reason. And as I continued to grow, I had a fascination with little green army men. How many of you guys remember those little green army men? I think I had more than anybody I've ever met. I had probably 1,000 of those little green army men. I had the little army men. I had tanks, jeeps, artillery pieces, everything. I used to go out into the backyard by myself and play little war games because I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. I know that some of my older relatives loved John Wayne movies, and John Wayne was in every war movie back at that time. And that was like very heroic. War was just, the most heroic thing you could do. I learned years later that fascination that I had with the Marine Corps and the military in general came from me seeing those images of my great-grandfather and my mother's uncles in uniform. And also, as I traced my family's history, I discovered about 3 years ago that my great-grandfather's great-grandfather, at the age of 53, enlisted in the Union Army in a colored troop unit in Mississippi and fought in the Civil War to free himself and his family members. And so there's a long, rich tradition of military service in my family. And as I've grown during the time that I got out of the Navy, I served 6 years in the Navy from 1980 until 1989. Fortunately, I got out 2 years before the U.S. went to war in the Middle East, and so I never served at a time where my ship I was on, USS Missouri, where we were lobbing these shells into countries and killing people. So I've never participated in any of that when I was in the Navy, and I'm very proud of that. A lot of my shipmates, and I'm still close friends with today, stayed in the Navy and served on the Missouri during the war against Iraq. And they told stories of lobbing these 16-inch shells into Iraq and killing people. And I'm glad I wasn't around to see any of that. So what I want to do, I actually wrote a speech, but I'm not going to use the speech that I wrote because something happened recently that kind of changed my mindset. I wanted to have a very kind of optimistic message for you all tonight because I know we need some of that. But something happened about a week ago. You may have read about it in the news, heard about it in the news. Something happened about a week ago, and it just really brought my spirit down to a very low level. And I've been trying to recover since a week ago. There were actually two things that happened. A good friend of mine, Jonathan Brostoff, who worked in this building, committed suicide. And then we had, that thing that happened where we have a new president-elect now. And I've been really depressed all week. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm not going to use the speech I wrote. I'm going to kind of talk about some other things, but I'm going to use part of the speech. So one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight was the importance of music. And I grew up at a time where people wrote just absolutely amazing music. I was a little boy. I wasn't listening to that music. I wasn't aware of the Beatles. I knew the Beatles were big stars, but I didn't know anything about Beatles music. And so John Lennon, wrote some beautiful songs. Probably his most famous song, we all know this song, right? Imagine. And so I looked at some of the words of that song. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, right? Most famous words to that song. Bob Marley sang a wonderful song called Get Up, Stand Up. He said you can fool some of the people sometimes, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And I love those words because I think they're just brilliant. And as I was listening to, some of this peace music, a couple months ago, I came across a song I had never heard of before, written by George Harrison, called Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth. And in this song, he said, give me love, give me peace on earth, give me light, give me life, give me free from birth, give me hope, help me cope with this heavy load. And so I'm carrying a very heavy load, as I'm sure many of you are, and I need some help to cope with this heavy load that we're all dealing with. All these wars that are going on around the world, in the Middle East, Ukraine and Russia fighting, the never-ending war in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the war that's happening in Haiti right now as we speak that nobody is mentioning anything about on the news. It's just really a horrible state of affairs around the world, and I wish it would end. I hope that at some point we as a species come to our senses and stop doing these things, but it's going to be really hard for that to happen as long as our government and our corporations continue to send munitions and weapons of war to other places around the world. 42% of all war exports on the planet come from the United States of America. Our government continues to send money to Israel, and they continue to send 2,000-pound bombs to Israel that they're using as supposedly defensive weapons that they're dropping on schools and hospitals, refugee centers. I don't know how those are defensive weapons, but that's what they call them. And these things are never going to end until we force our government to do better. So what I'd like for you all to do, you may remember those famous words, we the people. All right, you remember those words, we the people? Well, it's time that we the people start acting like the people and stop just allowing our elected officials to do whatever the heck they want to do. They work for us. We pay their salaries. We should demand that they do what we want them to do, not just accept that they're going to do whatever they choose to do. I tell people all the time, when I vote, I never wear the I voted sticker. Never wear it. In fact, my wife and I voted this past week, and we left and went somewhere, and someone was like, where's your I voted sticker? I'm like, it's in my pocket. I never wear it. They're like, why not? I said, because voting is just a single piece of what you're supposed to do as an American citizen. Voting is important, absolutely it's critically important, but what's more important than that is what you do after you vote. Do you hold those people you voted for accountable? Do you go and check to see what they've done, to see if they followed those promises that they made to you during the election? I told people you need to become serial harassers of the people that you vote for. Harass the hell out of them. Write them letters, send them emails, send them text messages, write on social media. Let them know that your voice is more important than their voice, because they wouldn't have their jobs if it wasn't for us. And we need to hold them responsible. So I want you all to help me do some things. I want you to help me cope with the fact that my daughter plans to never have any children because she doesn't want to bring a child into this ugly world that we live in today. Please help me cope with that. Can you help me cope with all of the brutal updates that I see in the news about what's going on in all of these wars around the world? Can you help me cope with the pain of hearing about mothers and children being blown up with American-made bombs on a daily basis? Can you all help me cope with the constant trauma being suffered around the world in war zones by people that I'll never know, I'll never meet, but I feel their pain every day? Can you help me cope with the weakness shown by Western nations who refuse to stop providing weapons of war to places around the world? The Western nations are more responsible for wars than any other nations on the planet Earth. Most weapons of war come from Western nations. And if we didn't keep building them, people wouldn't have the ability to keep using them. We need to stop building weapons of war, and that will help us move closer to peace. You're never going to have peace as long as you have corporations that people invest their money in to make weapons of war, to sell them to all of these countries around the world and make a nice return on their investment. If you look at some of the stocks of some of the biggest military weapons corporations in the US, their stocks have gone through the roof over the last little over a year since the Hamas attacks on Israel and the war started there. If you were invested in any of those stocks of these big American corporations that sell and make weapons of war, you would have made a nice profit over the last 13, 14 months. And so that's part of the problem. We need to address that as well. It shouldn't be a profit-making machine making weapons to kill people. That should not be something that you can profit from. That's very, very ugly. And it says something about we as people that we're okay with that. We don't have a problem with corporations building weapons to kill people with, instead of figuring out a way to help people around the world who are dealing with climate change, which people are still denying. Climate change is going to change the world in ways that we don't think about. One of the important ways it's going to change our country is it's going to change the pattern of immigration, not just here, but around the world. People are leaving some of the countries they live in, not because they want to come to the US because it's such a wonderful country. They're leaving to survive. They're leaving those countries so that they can actually live, right? And as long as we continue to have these weapons of war destroying countries around the world, we continue to deny climate change and continue to do nothing about climate change, we're going to continue to see people come to this country as a survival technique. And I want to one day live in a world that's free of war. I was born in 1965, and I didn't think about this until recently. Since I was born in 1965, there has never been a sustained period of peace on the planet since the day I was born. I just turned 59 years old on October 4th, and I literally cried on my birthday because I thought about all of the people that have died around the world in wars since my previous birthday, since my 58th birthday. Now, I had a stroke a month after my birthday, and I'm still here, but I thought about, man, I had a stroke, I survived, but think about all the people that have died in wars, just unnecessary deaths, totally and completely unnecessary deaths. And, I'm still here living to talk about, all these other things. And so I want all of you to make a vow to this day to do something. Please raise your hand if you're willing to do this. Let's take control of our country. Let's become the people. Become serial harassers of the people you voted for. You know who they are. Listen, one thing that the older generation does that the younger generation needs to learn how to do, write letters. Don't send text messages or emails. Write a damn letter to somebody, right? I know, because I know a lot of elected officials, they keep track of people who communicate with them. If you send them like 10 letters over the next 10 months, they're gonna remember you. If they see you walking through Mayfair Mall, they're gonna be like, oh, there's that guy that keeps sending me all of these damn letters. Send them letters. Be honest with them. Tell them that you want to stop sending weapons to kill people. I don't care where they're sending weapons anywhere on the planet. Tell them you don't want to be a part of that. You don't want your tax dollars to go towards that. You don't want your country to stand for war. You want your country to stand for peace. Please agree to do that. If you agree to be a serial harasser of your elected officials, raise your hand for me, please. Okay, great. I'm gonna hold you accountable, because if I'm here next year, I'm gonna ask you to provide me proof that you sent at least one letter. At least one letter. I used to be a teacher, so that's gonna be your homework for next year. If I'm invited to speak next year, I'm gonna ask you to bring one of those letters, a copy of one of those letters that you wrote. And so I'm out of time. We have a wonderful speaker coming up after me. And so thank you all for the invitation. Thank you for listening to me. And I appreciate you coming out tonight. And it makes me feel really good, to be here with you all. That sense of optimism that I wanted to have when I came here tonight is building back in my system, because I see all of these wonderful people in this room with me tonight. This helped me feel better. And so keep doing what you're doing, and tell friends, family members, coworkers, come with you next year to this event. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Reggie. All right, you got your homework now, right? Teacher said. Yeah, I just told him, I said, hey, I was born in 65 too, and I don't look nearly as good as him, but you know, hey. Yes. Sure. The White House is 202-456. 1111. Common? Oh, comments. Okay. So you can call that number, and Mr. Jackson will be proud of us for having taken the action there. So there you go. Thank you for that number. Yeah. What I'd like to do now, just for a moment before I hand it off to our treasurer here in a second, I'd like to share with you just briefly a way to take action that Reggie just challenged us on. The Veterans for Peace, along with Peace Action and the UN Association and many others, are conducting what's called a Back from the Brink campaign here in Milwaukee. I just recently read a book by Annie Jacobson. The title was Nuclear War, a Scenario. It scared the out of me to read that book. We scheduled this event. I have the TikTok here. It's supposed to be 83 minutes. If someone pressed the button tonight, another country towards us or us towards another country, our world, our planet, life on planet Earth would be destroyed in 72 minutes. Less time than we will spend here tonight. Our entire planet would be destroyed. And because of that, we are building a coalition of peace and justice groups here in Milwaukee to ask those guys right back up there, the Milwaukee Common Council, to sign a resolution and pass a resolution to abolish nuclear weapons. "72 minutes, the world could be over." So yeah, I mean, maybe just one little resolution in one city, not a big deal, but what if resolution after resolution after resolution is passed in city after city after city, and state house after state house, and Congress and the White House, and then we'd get rid of these nuclear weapons, right? So let's do our homework. So here's our homework. Back in the back, there's a table, and Steve's all the way in the back there. There is a table there that you can sign up, and here's the ask. We're gonna ask that you sign up, give us your name, your phone number, all of that. We're gonna be reaching out to you later and helping you, but we want you to contact your common council alderperson and say, hey, I need you to support this resolution as it comes up. I need you to support the resolution, and the more people that make the phone calls or write the letters, right, the better. And we will press them into action to pass this resolution. They did it in Madison, we can do it in Milwaukee. So that's the ask on your way out. Please see Steve, write your name down, give us your information so we can help you make that ask of our alder people, okay? So that is our ask tonight. We're building that coalition, and we want to pass this resolution because 72 minutes, it could be all over. I'd like to now hand off things to our treasurer, Mr. Paul Moriarty, who has a couple things to say.
Very quickly, I just want to thank our sponsors. You can find everybody who sponsored the event in our program. And in the back after our program, we have tables from Peace Action, Green Party, and our table, and Jewish Voices for Peace. So we're very grateful that they were all able to join us tonight. This is the 2 seconds where I put in a pitch. Events like this take some funds. Our beloved Mark Foreman is going to be handing out some buckets. If you can donate anything, we very much appreciate it. Our chapter puts on events like this every year. We donate to many peace and justice groups, and we support a lot of the coalitions and efforts that are going on in the city. So thank you for that. And then this is, I have to say, this part is probably one of my favorite parts of our program every year, and many of the years we've done this, I've gotten to introduce this wonderful man. You ready? He brings so much love and positivity and beauty to this event. Our most beloved poet, musician, and wonderful community member.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know who you're talking about, but
I was about to say your name. Harvey Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. George Martin isn't here tonight, unfortunately, to say it, so I'll say it. Hello, family. I'm grateful to be in your company tonight, and especially to gather in solidarity with the intrepid Veterans for Peace in their noble determination to reclaim Armistice Day, honoring peacemaking. And I want to honor Reggie Jackson for profoundly inspiring and affecting me with his deep sharing. Thank you, Reggie. I have a song to share, but first a few meditative words reflecting on the election, the aftermath, the attempt to cope with the overwhelming, changing situation. One might say a door was rudely slammed shut in our face. That's how it felt to many of us on Election Day. But I've heard that when one door closes, another door can open. I hope that's true. Yes, I'm certainly hoping, but though hope is a beginning, a good start, hope can only take us so far. It takes long time commitment to make the changes we need, keeping at it day by day till we succeed. By keeping at it, another door can open. As always, resilience is our friend. Rest, heal, till strength comes again. Take to heart the lessons to learn, shining our light till sunlight returns. Imagine possibilities, then do our best to make them real, shining our light. You got me, Steve? You get anything out there? I'm not hearing a bit here, but you're good now? Okay. The universe is filled with mysteries, shooting stars, black holes, vast galaxies. But we live in the strangest world of all, a planet where flowers bloom and bombs fall. The older I get, the more clearly I see the cycle of suffering roll relentlessly. Oh, we live in the strangest world of all, a planet where flowers bloom and bombs fall. The Israelis and Palestinians, the Ukrainians and Russians share so much, they're virtually cousins. Ah, this must be the strangest world of all, a planet where flowers bloom and bombs fall. I can barely imagine a world without war. Battles raged long before I was born. But in the midst of this dreadful gloom, wise little flowers peacefully bloom. Yes, the universe is filled with mysteries, strangest of all by far, war and peace. The veterans for peace keep showing us the way. May they lead us to a more peaceful day. Yes, may they lead us to a much more peaceful day. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you so much. Give Harvey another round. Thank you so much. Well, now is again my privilege to introduce someone, and perhaps I don't even need to introduce her. You probably already know her. You've seen her on the news, in the halls of Congress, confronting power. She's a giant in the fight for peace and justice in the United States, Miss Ann Wright. She'll tell her own story, but I'll just mention Ann is a career U.S. Army officer, retired colonel, also a U.S. diplomat that worked at the State Department. She resigned in protest of the invasion of Iraq. She's also on the advisory board of Veterans for Peace, as well as being active in several other organizations, the International Peace Bureau, World Beyond War, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, No to NATO, and a Code Pink board member. I think she's pretty busy. What do you think? Ann graciously responded to our call. Many of you know that Susan Schnall, our president of Veterans Peace, was scheduled to come, but unavoidably she had a family emergency, and Ann graciously responded and stepped up and said she would come. We are so thankful for your graciousness and so thankful that you are here. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ann Wright.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you to Bill, who has been helping organize this thing, and to Julie, who's been kind to be my host for the day. And also, I want to remember our good friend, George Martin. He's been a friend to all of us and all over the country. I mean, it just wasn't Milwaukee that had George Martin, it was the whole world that had him. So to George Martin, presente. Well, we're here to talk about Armistice Day. We're Armistice Day, you know, the day that was the day to end all wars from 1914 to 1918. When it finally ended, it was the armistice that ended it, and we were to celebrate peace for thereafter. Well, it's been thereafter, hasn't been too peaceful, has it? It really, as Reggie mentioned, we haven't had much of a peace, not much of a day of peace. How many of you all read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States? Well, yeah, that's where it's really laid out in the true history of the United States, how little peace that we have had. Our students, we as students, didn't learn about all of the wars that the United States had been in, and tragically, it's not ending at all. I mean, if we look at what's going on right now, where we've got, we finally got the Afghanistan war ended, but the war in Afghanistan continues on many of the Afghans. The war that I resigned over in 2003, the Iraq war, has ended in some ways, but the countries have never been the same after that. And as Roger told about Vietnam, I mean, that's never been the same. The wars that the United States has been in, after we say we are for peace, and we as veterans, on the day that now our government says it's not an armistice for peace, it's a time to recognize veterans who go out and fight the wars. So that's why I'm really proud of Veterans for Peace for saying, no, we want to bring back what the original meaning was of this day. It's for peace. It's not to glorify the people that have gone to fight wars and mostly come back injured, as one should be when you go out and kill your cousins. And I think what you said about the cousins of the Russians and the Ukrainians cousins and the Palestinians and the Israelis cousins, I mean, these are wars of cousins, and you would think at this time our legacy of, you know, human beings, that we could finally learn not to be at war, but no, we're not. And so here we have Today, we've got the genocide going on in Gaza. I'm wearing proudly the Veterans for Peace t-shirt that says Veterans Against Genocide. We are against genocide as individuals and as a national organization. We are against genocide. It doesn't matter where it happens, we're against it. And we're against weapons going in to fuel all of these wars, and whether it's in weapons going into the Ukraine, Russia conflict. I mean, we're sending weapons into Ukraine, and all sorts of other countries are sending them into Russia, and all it does is just fuel these things. We have the U.S. that's still participating in bombings. I mean, we are bombing in Iraq, we're bombing in Syria, we've bombed in Yemen. We look to Africa, as you've mentioned, where in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, still chaos reigns there. The gangs are murdering each other, and we have the largest movement of human beings now in the world is out of the Sudan, with a huge population displacement there. And in Haiti, just today, we hear that the Prime Minister of Haiti has been removed from office for a variety of reasons. And the chaos right within, a stone's throw of the United States, and a country that was the first elected democracy, the republic in our hemisphere. And it is still being tormented many times by what the U.S. is doing to it. And we'll just add to that Cuba, where the largest sanctions that the U.S. has ever put on in the 60 years that we've been putting on sanctions. The Trump administration put 270 sanctions on it, and the Biden administration didn't take any of them off. So we have things that are going on around this world that say that the Armistice Day really doesn't mean a whole lot to most of our politicians, but we as citizens certainly want to be known as people that want peace and not these wars. And that's why I think your characterization of how many of y'all want to be serial harassers, I love that. Well, that's what I've been doing for the last year, being in Washington, D.C. with Code Pink Women for Peace, with Veterans for Peace. This coming week, we have Peace Action that's organized, days of action in the U.S. Congress, where we harass Congress people, and they need to be harassed because of the votes that they're doing that are providing the weapons to fuel all of these conflicts. So how many of you all have ever been to the U.S. Congress and walked around the halls and gone into some of the offices? Well, quite a few of you. But for those of you that haven't, I mean, it is amazing. You still, let's knock on wood that in the next 4 years this doesn't stop, but right now you can walk right into the halls of Congress, you can knock on the door of congressional offices, and most of the time you don't even have to knock on them, you just open the door and go in and tell why you are there, what issue you are, and if you've made an appointment, you might get a time with a staff member. Very seldom do you actually talk to the Congress people themselves, but there are ways that you do find the Congress people, and it's usually when they are going to and from congressional hearings. And that's, Kevin mentioned that I've been on TV a few times. Well, that's usually when I get on TV, is when either you're in the congressional hearings and you stand up to tell the congressmen and women what you really think about the subject that they're talking about. Because seldom do the Congress people or the people that are testifying tell the whole truth about everything. And we do have the right to sit in as the public in these congressional hearings and let them know what we feel. But of course, there's a price to it. And that's usually, there's a tap on the shoulder if the cops are being nice. If they're not being so nice, they just reach right over and start pulling you out. And that's where age comes in. And so all of you all that are over the age of, whatever, it's good to let them know. I'm 78 years old. I have a hip replacement. And now I can say, I have a hip replacement. I have a knee replacement. Don't drag me around here, and stop these wars and stop funding all of this stuff and da-da-da-da-da. So you too can do that. And, how many of you all, well, maybe I shouldn't even ask this, but how many of you all have ever been arrested? Oh, come on. Good, that's right. Because every one of us needs to be arrested. We need to go into these jails. We need to go in and testify about what is happening in the jails in our communities. It is a real eye-opener when you go in and see who else is in jail. And you hear the stories of what people have done, and it's not murder. It's generally not drugs. Well, sometimes it's drugs, but it's generally things that you just would not think that a person would be put in jail for having your turn signal on too long, or, well, if you haven't paid your fines from other things, you do get pulled over, and if they run your name, then you may get pulled in. The last time I was in jail was in Galveston, Texas, and this was because we had blocked the entrance to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who had given a permit for giant oil tankers to come down Matagorda Bay, disrupting a 30-year-old capped Mercury Fund super site. They had given a permit for this destruction of this waterway, and I had a friend that was a fisherwoman right there, Diane Wilson. And Diane said, we've got to stop this thing. Let's go over to the Corps of Engineers and we're gonna blockade. So we blockade with a fishing boat, a tiny fishing boat that had been brought in on a little trailer. They took the air out of the tires of the trailer so that it was immovable. And then we chained ourselves into that fishing boat and said, yeah, we're blocking this until you take back that permit. Well, we waited and we waited and we waited, and finally there was a police car that came up, and some of our supporters went over to it and said, they're blocking the road, and aren't you gonna arrest them? And because you don't want to wait forever for these arrests. You got other things to do besides getting this thing done. And the policeman said, well, yeah, they're in the middle of the road, but I see cars going around them on both directions, so I guess they're not really blocking the road. And it's like, well, what do you have to do to get arrested in this place? It said, well, if you go out to the middle of that road and you sit down in the middle of that one, I've got to arrest you right then. So it was like, oh geez, here we go. So unlocking ourselves from the boat, getting in the middle of the road, and finally get arrested. And then we went into the jail, and who were sitting in the women's side of it? It was women who had not done any drugs, who had not done any, it was mostly traffic violations and things like that. And as we heard the stories of these women of being disrupted from their whole lives for these things that shouldn't be, that is one of the reasons why we all need to go in there and work for jail reform. So it's one of the civic duties that we have. We can disrupt the Congress, but we also have to take the heat for what happens with it, and it actually turns out very good for us as an educational process to see all the facets of our government. Well, enough about getting arrested. Okay, so that is part of your homework for next year. I hope that we're able to see a lot more hands go up on this. Peaceful, nonviolent protest that sometimes ends in these things. But if we look at what we're doing around the world, and for the last about 10 years, we've been saying we have 800 U.S. military bases around the world, outside the United States. Well, it's gone up. It's gone up now. We aren't reducing the presence of the U.S. military, we are now increasing it. In fact, now the estimates are we have 900 bases. And where are they? Where is the U.S. saying we need to increase the military presence? Well, if you look in Europe right now, where is the largest military base, U.S. military base in Europe? How many of y'all during the Vietnam era, which military base was biggest? What country had the U.S. military base? Probably Germany, yeah. It's not Germany anymore. How about the country of Romania? Romania now has U.S. military bases in it. Poland has U.S. military bases in it. How about Scandinavia? Now we have U.S. military base, they're not formal U.S. military bases, but the Scandinavian countries of Norway, Sweden, and Finland have given access to the U.S. military for 36 bases. And the U.S. military has increased the number of military exercises in Scandinavia by quadrupling what it normally has. If you look out, I live in Hawaii, and let me just tell you, I'm cold today here in Milwaukee. Your little brief adventure into what I would call a severe winter, but for you all, I mean, some of you are walking around in t-shirts in this, but from Hawaii, which is the base, the headquarters of the Indo-Pacific Command, the U.S. military command from the west coast of the United States all the way over to India. It's the largest geographic unified command that the military has, and its headquarters is in Hawaii, the very militarized state of Hawaii. On the island that I live on, Oahu, we have 5 major military bases, 5 of them. On the big island of Hawaii is the largest training area in the Pacific. It's called Puakaloa, and it's between the 2 volcanoes of Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa. And it's not just a training area for the United States, but the Japanese are sending in training people. The Australians are sending in. We have the largest naval exercise war games in the world that are off the shores of Hawaii every 2 years. It's called Rim of the Pacific, Rim of the Pacific. And it was just held this last summer. We had 25,000 military that were part of it, 29 nations, 4 submarines, 25 sea vessels, 200 aircraft, and guess what countries participated? It wasn't just the Pacific Rim countries, it was NATO countries, 8 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So what in the world is NATO Atlantic doing in the Pacific? It's that the US is urging countries that have any alliances with them to be ready to help out in case we do something in Asia. And of course, with the Obama administration, 16 years ago, when they started pivoting toward the Pacific, pivoting toward Asia, because they were drawing down in Iraq, and we always need an enemy, otherwise how can you keep these weapons flowing? As you mentioned, how can we keep all of these industries in power and building all of this merchandise unless we've got a reason for it? And so we needed another enemy, and so all of a sudden here came China. I mean, for decades, China has not been our enemy. I mean, it's been an economic competitor, that's for sure. And it certainly has had human rights violations, and they should be called out on that, as we should be called out on our human rights violations. But there's no reason that we should be challenging and saying that China is our enemy, for God's sakes. I mean, there are a few things that I kind of think that our politicians ought to take into account, like how big are these countries that we're calling our enemies? How many people do they have? Like 2.5 billion, and let's see, we have 320 million. I mean, manpower-wise, I don't think that's a really good idea. And since probably half of us would be without clothing tomorrow if we stop the imports of Chinese clothing, merchandise, and all that, I mean, it's like, why are you doing this? Except it's on the economic side, but now it's turning into, a real dangerous military situation where the Chinese, having seen us go into other places around the world, have bucked up their military and the number of vessels that they have in their military. While the US is going in to buck up Taiwan, the Republic of China, we've had a one China policy since the Nixon administration. What was that, 40 years ago, one China? Well, all of a sudden, starting with the Obama administration, we started sending in high-level diplomats. We started increasing the amount of weaponry that we make available for sale or loan. And so the PRC, the People's Republic of China, every time a US diplomat comes in to Taiwan, there is a fleet of jet aircraft that come from the mainland of China that come right up to the air defense zone of Taiwan saying, remember, this is a one China policy, and the Chinese have not invaded Taiwan. And while they say that Taiwan is a province of China, it's the provocations that we are giving to this whole situation that makes it so dangerous. A few more things about the Pacific. The Philippines, for 30 years, the US was kicked out of the Philippines. Well, now we have 9 bases in the Philippines. Guam, the small little island of Guam, is about ready to sink because it has such an increase in the number of US military bases. The newest Marine base, it's been 50 years since the Marines have had a new Marine base, and it was just inaugurated in Guam. So thousands of Marines are coming out of Okinawa there. Marines are going into Australia. We have military, the military is building runways in Micronesia, Palau, and then the Marshall Islands, which has been the testing ground for our nuclear weapons back in the 1960s, and is the back end of the missiles that come out of Vandenberg Air Base, intercontinental ballistic missiles that are fired in the longest trajectory that we have had, go into the Marshall Islands. And so 3 of their islands there are still US military territory. The US is opening new embassies in the Pacific in places we've never had because the Chinese have reached out to the Solomon Islands. So the United States finally is having a US embassy in the Solomon Islands, in Vanuatu, in Tonga, in Kiribati. All of these new places that the US is now focusing on because of the pivot to Asia, the pivot to the Pacific that is actually being challenged by the Chinese, saying this is our front yard. The US says, well, that's our backyard, all the way from California through Hawaii, all the way to China. That's our backyard. So we can do anything we want in there, to include sending of armadas of ships. We have armadas of ships, just not one little ship. Every time an aircraft carrier goes through the South China Seas, it has a group of usually 10 other vessels that accompany it to protect it. And so these armadas are sailing through in what are called freedom of the seas military operations, authorized by the Law of the Sea Conference, which the United States is not even a member of. But we'll go ahead and use whatever we want from it. The types of new drone or warfare that we need to be concerned about in these days of the Armistice Day, the Day of Peace. Well, the types of weaponry that are being developed that we, the United States, are using, that, some of which we're getting from the Israeli military. The cooperation between the Israeli military and the US military has been going on for a long time. And in fact, a lot of the things that the US has done in Afghanistan and Iraq were based on things that the Israelis had been doing to Gaza over the last 20 years. The use of drones in Gaza, the Ukraine, and in Russia. New techniques of how do you kill people? Well, how about we put explosive devices in pagers and walkie-talkies and find a way for a country to buy those things, and then we blow them up. And how about we just go ahead and go to another country and execute people, which was done in Iran, where the Israelis, for some reason, I mean, this still is a mystery to me, how the Israelis were able to get into one of the Iranian military VIP lodgings and put an explosive device into a place where Hania had stayed 6 months before. And then when he went there and stayed in it, to blow them up. I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago and attending a conference in The Hague, a small peace conference. And as one part of the conference, they took us over to the International Criminal Court. and gave us a tour of it. And one of the justices on the court was kind enough to give us a briefing there. And as a part of this, they handed us little brochures about the cases that the International Criminal Court had in front of them. And so I thumbed through it, and sure enough, there was the one, Palestine and Israel, where the prosecutor of the ICC had recommended to one of the appellate courts that arrest warrants be issued to 3 Palestinians that were a part of Hamas, and 2 Israelis, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant, who's no longer the defense minister. Well, I asked the judge, I said, will it have any influence on what happens on the issuance of these arrest warrants when 2 of the people that were to get the arrest warrants have already successfully assassinated the other 3? And that's what's happened. None of the 3 Hamas leadership are alive today. They have been essentially executed. Well, the justice, as one would expect, she kind of grimaced and went, well, this is a case that's still under, we can't really comment on it. But it just shows, the strange things that we're dealing with right now, that we have new kinds of warfare that are going on, that we have wars that are going on all over the place. And yet while we sit here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I want to thank Veterans for Peace Chapter 102 for having what I suspect is the largest group of people in the United States that are meeting on Armistice Day under the auspices of Veterans for Peace. You all ought to be so proud of yourselves. And to have had this going on for what? Now this is the 18th year that you all have been coming to the City Hall of Milwaukee and saying that you are for peace and not for war. So it's a great honor to be here. It's a great honor to hear the stories of how many of you all have been out on those street corners every Friday or every Saturday since the beginning of the Iraq War. All of the things that you in Milwaukee are doing to make our world a much safer and better place. And the Back from the Brink campaign, where we really need to be serious about trying to get nuclear weapons out of the hands of everybody. I'll just mention one thing. In the island of Hawaii, the big island they call it, Hawaii, in the city of Hilo, the city or the county council just this last week has now taken the exemption away from the U.S. military to their nuclear-free zone. They had a nuclear-free zone that started back in the 1980s, except they gave, guess who? The U.S. military an exemption. I mean, who else has nuclear weapons? It's not like any of us do. Well, finally, at long last, they were able to get the county council to say, to vote that the military no longer has that exemption. And so if the military tries to bring in a nuclear-powered ship into the Big Island, which I'm sure they're going to do, then we have something to hang on to. The last time this was brought to a head back in 1983 when one of the great activists of Hawaii, Jim Albertini, jumped in front of a nuclear-powered ship as it was coming into Hilo Harbor to try to stop it. Well, he got 3 years in federal prison for that. But now it is, 40 years later, we're trying to get this military exemption off and have succeeded on it. So with all of that, we do have some wins. It's going to be a tough next 4 years on a variety of things. The Trump administration has a lot of things that they're cooking up for us as to try to silence a lot of protests, but that's where we have to be really strong. And the ACLU has already come out with a full-page ad in yesterday's paper saying, we're the ACLU and we're not moving to Canada, we're staying right here, and listed all the things that they anticipate they're going to have to be challenging the Trump administration very soon. So with that, I will turn it back over. It's a pleasure to be here, and Milwaukee's a great city, and you've got great activists, and keep up the work. And for sure, write all those congressmen and be a serial harasser of the U.S. Congress. Thank you. Thank you.
Wasn't that great? Thank you so much, Ann. Well, again, I want to thank everyone in this room for attending our 18th annual Reclaim Armistice Day event, where together we celebrated peace, not war. I want to thank our musicians, Richard, David, and Harvey. And we're going to ask them to come up, and while we're going out, if they want to send us off a song, that would be wonderful. I want to thank our speakers tonight, Reggie and Ann, as also Roger, our own Roger as well. And I want to thank you for attending, but not just attending. I want to thank you for your continued commitment to peace and justice in the city of Milwaukee and in our war-torn world. Peace. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Give yourselves a hand. Yeah.